I am big time stepping out of my comfort zone with this one. I haven't done a YouTube video like this, but I got challenged by a follower, Nelly from Maryland, to do a video on how to interpret an EKG strip. So here goes. This is not going to be perfect. This is not going to be all encompassing. You're not going to walk away from this video knowing with confidence how to read an EKG, but here are some of the basics. First, you've got to know the cardiac conduction system of the heart. The impulse originates at the SA node, which is located in the atria. It then travels down to the AV node, where it briefly stops. It then starts again and proceeds through the bundle of His and down the bundle branches, and then to the Purkinje fibers, where it provides the zap for the ventricles. And then the ventricles repolarize and everything goes back to normal like it should in a perfect world. But this gets messed up, and when this gets messed up, we usually have problems. Also, keep in mind that the impulse is supposed to come from the atria, the SA node. The intrinsic rate of a beat generated by the atria is a normal heart rate of 60 to 100. There are backups, though, if that SA node in the atria isn't doing what it's supposed to do. The AV node or junction can generate a beat, hence the term junctional rhythm. And the intrinsic rate of the AV junction is 40 to 60. And the ventricles, the Purkinje fibers, can generate an impulse. They're woefully ineffective at doing this. You don't want to see a ventricular rhythm. The complexes are wide and bizarre looking, but more importantly, the intrinsic rate of the ventricles is 20 to 40, not enough at all. So now let's review the anatomy of the PQRST complex and where are waves A through O. Hell if I know. It starts at P. Don't ask me why. The P wave represents atrial depolarization. The SA node depolarizes and generates the electricity that is going to result in a heartbeat. It then travels to the AV node and briefly stops. This is the PR interval that you see. Then the bundle branches and ventricles depolarize, and you see this represented as the Q, R, and S waves. And then the T wave represents ventricular repolarization, and everything, hopefully, in theory, should go back to normal. Oh, and this little guy here is the ST segment. This plays virtually no role in rhythm interpretation, but certainly it plays a role when you're reading a 12-lead EKG to identify an MI, ischemia, OMI criteria type stuff. But that's 12 leads. We're focusing on rhythm strips here. So here's how I go about reading a rhythm. You may love my method, you may hate it, it may work for you, it may not work for you, but here goes. First, determine the rate. And by determining the rate, I mean by looking at the strip printed out and not the number displayed on the monitor, because it isn't always going to be accurate, especially if you're using one of those Tempest Pro pieces of shit that's made by Philips. So you print a 6-second strip, and most EKG paper that prints out has hatch marks at the top to mark every 3 seconds. Since this strip came from the Tempest Pro, which sucks, there are no hatch marks. Just trust me that this is a 6-second strip. You can get a generally accurate rate by counting the number of complexes in the 6-second strip and then multiplying it by 10. Here you see 10 complexes. 10 times 10 is 100. So the rate is 100 beats per minute. The other method is the 300, 150, 100 method. You take a complex where the wave aligns with, or you can approximate if none are aligning, with the darker line at the start of a big box. Then count how many big boxes is it until the next complex on the strip. If there is only one big box between them, then the rate is going to be 300. Next is 150, then 100, then 75, then 50, then 40, I think it's actually 43, but who cares? And then 30, I think it's really 37, but you get the point. And then 20, 10, dead, and so on and so on. Take the strip here. You see the first complex aligns nicely with a darker line. Count how many darker lines, big boxes there are until the next complex. 300, 150, 100, boom, 100. Beautiful. Here's one that's a little faster. Keep in mind, I zoomed in on the strip, so it's not a 6-second strip, and you can't just count the complexes and multiply by 10. Here you have a QRS aligning with the dark red line. 300, 150-ish, maybe a little more. That's your rate. Keep in mind that doesn't always work if there's a lot of variability and space between complexes, but that's a little more advanced stuff and it's outside the scope of this video. Next step is to determine if the rhythm is regular or irregular. There's a little bit of a wavy baseline here, but it looks like the QRS complexes are evenly spaced out. You can always, and sometimes you need to bust out your calipers, but who does that? Although I'm sure somebody carries calipers on their overloaded radio strap or on one of those stupid chest harnesses if you're a flight medic or a flight nurse, but I will shut up because the last time I made fun of a chest rig, someone sent me an extremely angry DM. Let's look at this strip here. Thanks, Alexis from Ohio, for sending it. Clearly in irregular rhythm. Then ask, is the rhythm regularly irregular? Meaning, does it follow a specific pattern of irregularity? And that 6-second strip often isn't going to be enough to cut it. Sometimes you got to print out a pretty long strip to identify pattern. And if you're printing them out on the Tempest, I guarantee you that that fucking printer is going to jam. Anyway, regularly irregular. These are usually going to be heart blocks, sometimes atrial flutter that changes up conduction ratio. Again, more advanced stuff. We're doing the basics here. More commonly, at least in my opinion, it's going to be irregularly irregular. There's no pattern. There's no rhyme or reason. And if it's consistently irregularly irregular, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be AFib. I'm sure someone will light me up on the comments, though, about the one time in 36 years they have seen a wandering pacemaker, but I digress. Next, look at the QRS duration. Is it narrow or wide? Insert mom joke. Normal is wider than 0.12, which is 3 small boxes. You measure at the base. Here, you can see this is just on the cusp of being wide. Count the boxes. I think my art may have been a little bit off, but for a 41-year-old doing this tech shit, it's really not that bad. You get the point. This one is smack you in the face. No shit, it's wide. Again, insert mom joke. I'm sorry, I went to an all-boys Catholic school and I haven't matured since high school. What's going to make a QRS wide? Usually it's something totally lame and nonplussing, like a bundle branch block that the patient has had since the end of NOM, or it's a PVC, but serious stuff that can kill you will certainly wide the QRS. And don't forget that a ventricular rhythm is going to be wide and bizarre and slow looking. Next, look at the atrial activity. Are the atria communicating with the ventricles? The atria should communicate with the ventricles as the SA node depolarizes, generates an impulse, and that impulse travels down the pathway, eventually stimulating the Purkinje fibers in the ventricles. Is there a P before each QRS? If so, good. This means the atria and ventricles are communicating and electricity is now flowing the way it should. Is there a QRS after each P wave? You don't want to see little cuck P waves that aren't going to fire its QRS load. That makes us sad. That means that the P wave is being cock blocked. I'm serious. If you see a P wave without a following QRS, then that is a heart block. See my heart block video for more on that. Do the P waves march out? This has to do with regularity and if there is a heart block present, determining what kind and what degree of heart block it is. If there are P waves, are they uniform or are they different looking P waves means that the SA node isn't generating all of the impulses like it should. Remember that each cardiac cell has the property of automaticity, meaning that it can generate a heartbeat. If you see a bunch of different looking P waves, then the impulses are coming from the atria still, which is good, but who knows from where? It could be any cell in the atria generating the impulse, and something is amiss, like irritable atria or some kind of nodal problem. What's the PR interval? The distance between the P wave and the R wave. Normal is 0.12 to 0.2, no more than one big box. If it is delayed, that's a block. If it's short, that could be due to a number of maladies, chiefly some kind of pre-excitation syndrome. If the PR interval is long, that's a heart block. And if the PR intervals are different, that is most likely some kind of a heart block. Again, see my heart block video for more on that. So let's put it all together. Let's look at this strip. Again, trust me that it's a 6-second strip. What's the rate? Counting the complexes, I see 7. 7 times 10 is 70. Even I can do that math. Is it regular? Nope. It kind of is, but it's got these fucked up wide and bizarre complexes interfering with the regularity. What is the QRS duration? Well, most of the complexes definitely look less than, but there are those 2 ugly wide complexes. What's the atrial activity? Well, you have P waves for each of the normal looking QRS. Each P wave appears to have a QRS after it. PR intervals look normal in length and uniform. But what is up with these wide and bizarre complexes? Well, go back to what's going to make your QRS wide. If it was a bundle branch block, all of the complexes would be wide. If it was hyperkalemia or an effect from a medication, then yeah, probably all the complexes are going to be wide. But how come only some of them are wide? What about a ventricular rhythm? Well, the rate's not slow, but these certainly look wide and bizarre. And wide and bizarre should trigger you to think ventricular beats. They don't have a P wave before them, and we know that ventricular beats don't have P waves before them because they come from below the atria. I know this is kind of going from A to B to C to T, but this is a basic short video. These are PVCs, premature ventricular complexes. This is a normal sinus rhythm with PVCs. I know I went very fast in this video. I don't even know if it was helpful. You're not going to be able to learn how to do rhythms in a 10-minute-ish YouTube video taught by me. I used this book to teach me how to read EKGs. My dad also used this book when he went to medical school. It is probably the best book out there for learning how to read a rhythm strip. You can read it in a couple of hours. The print's big, there's pictures, and it's written for idiots like me. There is one hair in the soup, though, with this book, and I know people are going to light me up for saying that this is a good book. The author, Dr. Dale Dubin, was a pedophile. This came to light after he wrote the book. He's dead, which we are happy about. We don't like Dale Dubin. Dale Dubin, bad man. He's burning in hell, and I hope he's sharing a very hot room with someone that looks like that guy from the Barry on the bed meme for all of eternity. But he did write a really good EKG book, and I'm endorsing his EKG book, not his hard drive. People are trying to cancel this book and they say not to buy it, but a court order did demand that the proceeds for this book go to his victims. And as his victims get older, because it is a really old book, I believe that the proceeds now go to a fund for victims of sexual abuse. Bad guy author, but you can learn EKGs and the money doesn't go to him, it goes to a good cause. And once you have mastered reading a rhythm strip, you can then master how to interpret a 12-lead EKG. And we all know and adore the author of this next book. You don't have to worry about him being a pedophile. He loves the MILF genre, but that's besides the point. I wrote a 12-lead EKG guide. It's available on Amazon. It's super cheap, and the foam ed nerds out there hate me for writing it because I dumbed it down significantly. I'm going to shut up now. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I hope this was helpful. I accepted the challenge.